So good day, everyone. My name is Mike McCammon, and I am the Executive Director of the NFC Forum. I welcome you to our second day of our open forum for our member meeting this June 23rd. Obviously, we would love to have been meeting in person, but circumstances in the world have not allowed us to do that. But hopefully we've got well, actually, I know we have a very good and interesting talk and panels for today, and a lot of speakers that I know you're going to all want to hear from. So I'll go ahead and get us started. Next slide, Patty. Now, Prati, if you want to, you don't have to be on camera until we toss it to you, just so you know. But good afternoon. All right, so some quick housekeeping for attendees if you haven't participated in one of our webinars before. There is a control panel that you can see on your screen. By default, you are muted when you join the meeting, but you can select from several different audio choices in terms of how you want to get the audio for this program as well. There's a questions pane. We don't have time until the panel to really answer a lot of, we don't have like Q&A set time, but please feel free to use the QA, the QA panel to suggest any questions, and if we can get to them, we will. Immediately following the webinar, there'll be a short survey that'll pop up. Please complete the survey if you could. Your feedback obviously is very important to us. The slides from this presentation will be available to members on the CAVI's, to NFC Forum members on the CAVI website after the meeting, and sections of this event are likely to be cut out the video and will be available on our YouTube channel following the event over the next week or so. Next slide, please. So this will be our agenda for today. My role as simply as MC is to, this is not exactly correct, I don't think. But actually, the agenda should just skip from here to Endo-san, which I'll be introducing here in a minute, which we'll be talking about basically the management and use of identities in the MaaS environment. Then we'll switch over to Prati. Both, and by the way, Endo-san and Prati are the co-chairs, or chair and vice chair, I should say, of the MIT SIG of the NFC Forum. And then the majority of our programming will be a set of case studies from around the world talking about how NFC can be used in a transit and a MaaS environment. And then we'll follow that up with a panel at the end of our session, and then I'll close this out. I will let you know there's also going to be a networking session afterwards. We'll be providing that link at the end. You're more than welcome. It's totally optional. You're more than welcome to come. It would be kind of like the reception area that we would have after a typical event if we were meeting in person. Next slide, please. Certainly, the NFC Forum has lots of members, but I do want to make a quick shout out to Infineon. This event would not be possible without their support as a premier registration sponsor of the event. And we're very thankful for all of our members, like I said, but I do want to do a quick shout out to Infineon and our great partners there. Next slide. The first two speakers of our session today, as I mentioned, are going to be Prati and Endo-san. Endo-san is with DMP and Prati is with Infineon. We'll go to the next slide. And what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Endo-san to walk us through the management of use of identities in MaaS. And I'll just turn it over to Endo-san with DMP.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can't see you, okay. but I can hear you.
Oh, okay, can you see? Okay. I will check through the well. Can you see me? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. My name is Hisayoshi Endo, and I work at Nippon Printing, and as a business planner for the mobile payment solution in the DNB, and hope I'm MIT Vice Chair about the NFC Forum. And this presentation for the title is the management and use of the identities in mobility and transport powered by the NFC technology. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this slide will be the management and use of the identity in the mobility and transport. And this background is in the past, the seamless travel was often limited to local or regional transport ticketing schemes, which supported mainly public transportation. And today's multimodal travel and mobility as a service, MaaS is a major global trend. And customer demand the transport service offers that include all phase of the journey from the start of the final destination. In additionally, the public transport service modes of the transportation like taxi, car rental, or car sharing, bikes, scooters, or ride sharing must be supported. And in this December in 2020, we will publish for the marketing requirement document (MRD), and it's described the business process and NFC use case which support consist ID concept for use in the system solution for the MaaS and the names requirements to the NFC products. Okay, next slide, please. This document describes the business process and use case demonstrate how transport service provides and mobility platform operations for may act as a provider of the trustworthy identities. So this as a point is a 5 point. Is a first is a generation of the identities and the identifiers for the customers media and the application which are specifically designed for the service provider and the MaaS purpose. And the consolidation of the existing customer identities in order to achieve defined level of trust. Third one is an enhancement of the existing sets of the customer ID attribute according to the needs of the certain modes of the transportation. The first one is maintenance and the management of the identities and the related attributes. Finally, the provisioning of the identity and ID attributes for use by the partners of the mobility platform and other transport service providers. Okay, next slide, please. So this is an image for the provider for the example for the customer identities ID, which is especially designed for the mobility market. And it's not only the customers, but also the customers' media can be characterized by the identity and its particular attributes. And identity ID are typically for the generated and maintained by the transport organization. And the attribute includes at least on the ID2 and typically also credentials that support authentication and identification of the customer media. Next slide, please. So this is how to connect to the customer related media. So this image provides an example of how MaaS specific customer identities ID and the media identity ID can be implemented and connected. The customer shall be able to manage his ID and disconnect his customer media to or from his ID via his online account. And if disconnected, anonymous use of the customer's media is supported. Next slide, please. So the main business process for the mobility idea management is almost a straight plan, and business process A is a definition implemented and maintenance of the ID service. And the business process B is a partner lifecycle management, and business process C with identity management and identity provisioning. So the next slide will be the most details for the this business process. The process A will be defined, implemented, and the maintenance of the MaaS ID service, which was a 3-point. First is the definition of the implemented of the system and import of the existing ID and ID attribute ID service operation. The business process B will be the partner the life cycle management. It will be the 3-point is the onboarding of the partner and operation and terminating on the cooperation. The business process C will be the identity management and identity provisioning. It will be initial environment of the ID and the management IDC and IDX. Status monitoring for the expression and handling ID service to internal and external partners. So, next slide, please. So this MRD document, the next step will be the almost 2-point. And the first is the use case and function requirement for the defining, reminding the use case, and drive for the functioning requirements of the system components from the use case. And second category will be trust category for the EIDs, certainty for the measuring trust of the data and environment, requirements for the knowledge about the common procedure that have been used, and finally the technical certainties for the EID and the BSI recommendations. So this is that's all for my EID document for the overview of this document session. So it will be the next will be the pretty, and I will be change for you the presentation.
All right, thanks, Endo-san. As you can already see, I'm sorry, I don't have my video on. As you can already see, the NFC Forum is trying to take a lead in guiding both the intra and extra system work around identity to enable MaaS. And of course, this work's being done in our MIT SIG. And just as for those of you that are not members of the NFC Forum, you can download the MRD that Endo-san was discussing from our website. Thank you, Endo-san.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Arigatou gozaimasu. Prati, I'll go ahead and let you get started. Prati is the chair of MIT SIG and going to walk us through kind of future casting around the future of mobility enabled by NFC.
Thank you, Mike. So I will be sharing with all of you our some impressions from the white paper that we have developed and an infographic that we have developed at the MIT SIG. And the name of the white paper is The Future of Mobility Enabled by NFC. Next slide, please. For this white paper and in general for our MIT SIG activities, we are riding the wave of the mega trend in urbanization. And as the world becomes increasingly urbanized, we believe NFC would definitely be able to make mobility convenient and efficient. As most of you would have already heard, according to United Nations, 55% of global population were city dwellers in 2018. That number we expect would even grow further to 68% within 30 years. And by 2030, we expect that 43 mega cities, each with more than 10 million inhabitants, would be there and around the globe. These increasingly dense concentrations of populations, they pose challenges for urban mobility. For NFC, we see this also offers new opportunities for mobile operators and their partners. And here we believe NFC technology can help cities overcome some of these challenges and help mobile operators, partners, and system integrators take advantage of the opportunities that this technology can provide. Next slide, please. So NFC and MaaS, mobility as a service, right? So an urban mobility solution with NFC in MaaS can address major mobility related needs in our view. Easier transport access because NFC can allow tap and go, which makes throughput efficient. More affordable and efficient public transport operations as speed is higher due to the low latency of NFC interface. NFC standardization activities can further help broader transport interoperability. Our compliance program is geared towards making the user experience for NFC seamless and comfortable, because users don't need to look for which application they need to open. Just tap and go would be the mantra that we expect in urban mobility solutions of the future. This will lead to more frictionless commerce because the convergence of applications can be supported by NFC. And this white paper talks about how NFC-enabled MaaS will fulfill all these needs and beyond. Next slide, please. So while we are enabling MaaS from NFC, our activities within the MIT SIG, they enable that the NFC technology can be tuned to the requirements that MaaS will confront us with. The standardization activities and the guidance on additional system level requirements to interoperate, to provide more seamless user experience. This is enabled by the NFC technology and by the activities that we do within the NFC Forum. NFC Forum has been around for over 15 years, and a foundation of collaboration and innovation has been laid by the forum, and the MIT SIG furthers this by doing liaisons and collaboration with other standardization bodies as well. As I mentioned earlier, NFC is in the heart. One of the key principles that we follow within NFC Forum is interoperability through open standards that enables any market player to employ a sustained and flexible base layer of technology so that there is a consistent performance once an urban MaaS solution has been implemented. Next slide, please. And here, as the white paper reaches the later, so the last few pages of the white paper, we are here also elaborating how NFC Forum certification program paves the way for MaaS, because device makers, tag makers, and public transport readers from multiple sources can be compliant to each other and interoperable if with the NFC Forum specification. Our certification program, this ensures that the seamless travel experience for both service providers and users are assured, where the performance is measured. We try to reduce with the certification program a reduced customer support costs and an ability to offer new valued services. So the underlying interface itself is tested and interoperable. There is an easy 6 steps to certify your products. So those who are interested can reach out to us. And the 6 steps are, of course, to start with connect, join, prepare, test, apply, and then promote your products. Next slide, please. As Mike already mentioned, we have the resources, the white paper itself, how NFC transforms urban mobility in billions, as well as the infographic, which elaborates the future of mobility driven by NFC. These are all accessible and available for all of you. The links would be there on the public website as well as provided as resources. Next slide, please. In today's open forum, what you would hear in the next hour would be how forward-thinking transport operators are already paving the way for MaaS and enhancing mobility services. And in this, we have from JR East, Nugo Nishioka-san, who would be speaking shortly. From Visway Mobile Ticketing, Luis Brose. From Itso Limited, Steve Holden. From APTA, we would have Nicole Dupuy. From Calypso Networks Association, Philip Capro. And from Conduent, Stephanie Deplan. I hope I have announced everybody's name correctly. If not, excuse me for that. Next slide, please. With this, I hand over to Nishioka-san.
Okay. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm going to start. My name is Nobuo Nishioka from East Japan Railway Company. The title of my presentation is Japan MaaS use case. Sorry, using Suica card. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the content of today's presentation. Next slide, please. First, I want to introduce the outline of JR East. JR East is the passenger railway company. We have high-speed train, metropolitan train, and regional train. Our business area covers eastern part of Japan, as shown here. The company data is also mentioned in this slide. Next slide, please. There is business consists of mainly 3 pillars. First is transportation service. This is quite simple for railway companies. That is, we have high-speed train service and conventional train service. And the next one is lifestyle service. For some people, this might sound very strange and unique. So this pillar is that the business, like the shopping mall in the stations or near the stations or office buildings, and also kindergartens, station kiosks, and water vending machines, and so on. Every business relate to the stations. That is lifestyle service. And the last one is IT and Suica service. This is a service, e-ticket or payment service with Suica card, and also credit card business. And we have also a reward program called Jerry Point. Next slide, please. From here, I want to talk about the Suica itself. What is Suica? Suica is a tool enabling a seamless experience in transport-related service. When a customer have a Suica card, he or she doesn't have to find their paper ticket when they take train, or they don't have to find their wallet when they buy something. Instead, so you can just tap your Suica card, even either the ticket gate or the reader writer of the e-money terminal, and so on. Next slide, please. So this is a kind of Suica history. Suica service started in 2001 as e-ticket. Now, after that, Suica card was integrated with credit card or a smartphone. The smartphone service is called Mobile Suica. Now, it supports Apple Pay or Google Pay. And Suica is used as e-ticket, e-money, and personal authentication. And the last one might be very important for now. Suica has become the important tool that helps MaaS service of Zero East. And one note in the table below that as for e-ticket, with just Suica, with just one Suica card, user can use it as pay-as-you-go service, or commuter pass, or season pass, or high-speed train. Next slide, please. And from here, I'm going to talk about the MaaS world Suica made. Actually, Suica started 2001, as I mentioned, but when the service service started, it was only for the purpose of taking a train. For user prospect, it was just a seamless movement. And another thing of MaaS step 1 is that in the step 1, Suica was only for Zero East business area. And as for MaaS step 2, that was 2004 when Suica e-money service launched. So in addition to the seamless movement in the step 2, seamless payment became available. But as the step 1, so this service was only in Zero East business area. So next big turning point is 2013, when Suica became interoperable service between major cities. That was MaaS step 3. So before the MaaS step 3, Suica service was only in Zero East business area, but after 2013, Suica was available in major cities in Japan. Seamless movement and seamless payment were possible after 2013. And now, so we are in the MaaS step 4 level. Next slide, please. Before proceeding MaaS level 4, I want to explain the smart card interoperable service in Japan briefly. Actually, in Japan, currently 10 public transport operators in major cities issue their own smart card. They became interoperable with the smart card in 2013. but only pay-as-you-go service and e-money service. And the 10 cards shown in this slide are the interoperable smart cards currently in Japan. Next slide, please. So back to JR East MaaS step 4. Suica so far was only either JR East area or for major cities, but in MaaS step 4, we started to focus on local areas or local MaaS operators. So this map is a business area of JR East. Even in JR East business area, there are some MaaS operators whose services are independent with each other, but they want to have a liaison partnership with Suica. Actually, last March, we started a new MaaS liaison, and next March, we will have formal MaaS liaison plans. Actually, next slide, please. How to achieve the MaaS liaison of JR East is shown here. Actually, JR East made a bus platform for local MaaS operators so that they can reduce the initial cost of e-ticket service. Actually, the local MaaS operators are not so rich, and their main PT is usually bus service. Therefore, JR East developed a bus platform, and so that they can start e-ticket service easily. And one thing here is that a specific Suica for bus platform is required. This is not so expensive Suica card. The spec is just different from normal Suica card. And the picture in this slide is what JR East hoped as the good MaaS bus platform ecosystem. So JR East made a bus platform, and with that platform, MaaS operators seek liaison with Suica, and the MaaS operator implement JR East bus platform, and the Suica cover more area, and JR East this platform became more popular, and so on. So this is what we think the ideal bus platform ecosystem. Now, actually, so JR East hopes that this platform activates local MaaS service and eventually Suica service itself. Next slide, please. So what experience that MaaS service enables is a seamless experience for both bus platform Suica and normal Suica. This is the comparison table of normal Suica and bus platform Suica from MaaS perspective. In addition to normal Suica service, it is available for bus platform service operators to have their own local service with their bus platform Suica, such as the entry discount of museums, and the free coupon of local restaurant, and so on. But with normal Suica service, customers can use the Suica like mobile Suica service, and auto top up is available. And normal Suica service is partially available in local area, so as pay as you go. So no problem for the customers just to use public transportation. So our purpose of this platform is to activate a seamless experience, not only there is the area, but also within Japan with just one Suica card. Next slide. That's all of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nishioka-san. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. If we go to the next slide, Patty. It is Luis Bresse from Wizway Mobile Ticketing. And we're going to talk a little bit about some successes and a case study of how NFC is being used in France.
Thank you, Mike. And I just wanted to say how much it was an honor for me to speak with GR East and the Suica teams, which has made a great job and which are an example for us. Just a couple of words about Wizway. My name is Luis Bresse, and I'm the CEO of Wizway, which is a specific company. We are an enabler to prevent something. Next slide, please. Which is the current customer experience. And currently, it's important to solve problems. And the problem in many transit networks is the problems of queues and the problems of getting a ticket to use the public transit. And we are a company that is backed by 4 major companies. 2 of them are transit operators in France, which are SNCF, French Rail, which operates regional and high-speed trains long distance throughout France, and RATP, which runs many transit networks worldwide, among which the Paris Transit Network. And also 2 technical specialists, which are Orange, the mobile network operator, and Thales, the security specialist, because we think the main way to solve the problems of queues and to improve customer experience, next slide please, is by bringing the mobile technology and making life of passengers much easier than it is today. And definitely when talking about MaaS, but also when talking about customer experience, the mobile comes immediately at mind. NFC technology has been prevalent and is growing amongst transit networks for the last 20 years. But the question is how can we introduce the mobile into that? Next slide, please. And there are 2 ways of doing that. One thing we should not forget is that mobile technique does not obviate the need for physical media. We do not believe at Wizway we are specialists in mobile ticketing, but we do think that many customers will still keep some form of physical media, devices, tickets of any form. So we do not think that the mobile is going to replace them. And there are 2 ways to choose a mobile technology. Next slide, please. One is by using the existing infrastructure and by making the mobile phones be compatible with the existing infrastructure, which brings a lot of benefits. No additional investment, the reuse of all what exists for the existing NFC tickets and NFC cards with the same customer experience, but transferred onto the mobile phone. And this is definitely the choice that we have made at Wizway. Next slide, please. But there's also a second possibility, which is to add a new mobile technology as what characterizes the mobile phone is its versatility. You do have a GPS, so you can have a be in, be out technology to locate where you enter the transit network and when you get out of the transit network. You do have a screen, so you may have solutions as easy having a green screen when you do have a valid ticket. Of course, there's the QR code and there's the Bluetooth technology, which is also available on the smartphone. And definitely for transit authorities and operators, there's a choice to be made whether reusing the same technology but transferring it onto the smartphone, or adding a new technology which brings sort of dual system, because you will keep the existing physical media. And then you will have some form of parallel ticketing solutions with different ticketing systems, and with, of course, additional costs and problems to be solved. Next slide, please. One thing also that is interesting about NFC and contactless, very much the term contactless payment and contactless is being prevalent in the use of contactless payment, which of course we see the example of London TfL, but many new examples now in Sydney, in Singapore, in New York with Omni, and many places with contactless payment growing in customer usage. Some people have thought that it was opposed to transit card emulation, as it does exist in other places, especially in Asia and now in Europe. But in fact, we do think that these two solutions, which both are based on the NFC technology, are very compatible with each other. Contactless payment is a great service for occasional customers using either physical cards or payment wallets, such as Apple Pay or Google Pay. It's very easy for anonymous customers. But on the other side, when you provide a transit card emulation into existing transit apps, which can be MaaS apps, then it brings a lot of additional services for the regular travelers. Of course, it is fully mobile and integrated into the mobile, and it adds a lot of benefits, such as the customer relationship management, where the transit authority knows who are the customers, what their customer usage are. And in fact, these two are very compatible and very complementing each other. Next slide, please. And it brings value, of course, for the transit agencies. I mentioned that in terms of customer knowledge, and it is obviously, as a mobile app is a key component of MaaS, but also for the travelers, because the integration into an app that does have to include public transit, which is of course pivotal in customer experience, using a mobility service around mega cities. It brings a lot of services in terms of door-to-door, multimodal, real-time information, ticketing, whatever the form of the ticketing. It can be prepaid ticketing, it can be postpaid ticketing, and in terms of customer care. And definitely, we do believe that one of the assets of MaaS is the app integration and the integration of several mobility solutions, some of which might not use NFC contactless and might use other technologies such as QR code, but definitely you have to include NFC into a MaaS solution on mobile. And next slide, please. So we developed a set of SDKs. So there is no mobile app of Whizway. Next slide, please. One of them is called WaitApp. It is a transit card emulation using several technologies, such as secure element, either with the SIM or the embedded secure element of the handset manufacturers, and also using the HCE technology on Android and on Harmony OS. And next slide, please. And we added to that a wait card, which to state frankly, we did not believe into at the very beginning, which is the ability to read and to reload physical transit cards through the smartphone. And we see that there's a lot of customer usage on that. So we really act as a technical enabler through open SDKs and APIs, which are easy to integrate into the existing mobile apps in order to remove the complexity from the customers and from the developers of the mobile app. So we deal with all the discrepancies that do exist between mobile phones. We have seen more than 700 different mobile phones through our platforms, and I can assure you that a Huawei that is sold in the US is definitely very different from the same smartphone brand in China and in Europe. So there are many differences, and we have to guarantee that from the customer perspective, the validation, the purchase of ticket is really a seamless experience. Next slide, please. And we also have added some additional services such as card lifecycle management to facilitate the customer service. The main question of customers is to know what happens if I lose my mobile phone. So we try to provide as many services to the PTOs and PTAs to solve these issues. Next slide, please. And we are already integrated into the key mobility apps in France. Obviously, those of our shareholders like RATP and SNCF, but we also are integrated in also main cities such as Strasbourg and Lille, which are cities which have roughly 500,000 people living in these cities, which use their own mobile apps, and we can see that this brings a lot of services to the customer. Next slide, please. With a traditional few clicks customer experience from the itinerary to the purchase, we very much believe that customers do not want to purchase ticket. That's something that is made compulsory. But what they want is to know how to get from point A to point B, to be informed about the possible disruptions or possible delays, and of course get a proper proof of travel to go from where they are to where they want to go. Next slide, please. I just wanted to share a few data from what happened recently. Of course, especially impacted by the pandemic. In France, we have experienced 3 lockdowns yet. I hope there's not going to be a number 4, but who knows? And through these lockdowns, which obviously have had an impact on our activity, we have seen a huge growth in terms of customer usage since the last 2 years, with about 50% average quarterly growth. Next slide, please. And this, in fact, hides 2 separate impacts. The last, I would say normal, I don't know what normal is now, but the average months of activity was February 2020 in France, with lockdown starting on March the 16th. And from that point, which is 100%, which is our basis, we see 2 different impacts. One is that we have not yet found normal usage of public transit. In the recent weeks, it has been up to 80%. That still means that 20% of the former users of public transit do not use public transit anymore, either because there is some form of home office, or because they are reluctant to use mass transit, which is seen as a non-sanitized way of moving around. So with a larger extent of the cost. So definitely there's a big challenge in the months and the years to come, which is to have customers go back to use collective mass transit. And definitely this goes very much through the customer service. And the other interesting figure we have found is the customer usage of mobile NFC, which is about 160% of what it was previously. In terms of customer adoption, the COVID has really accelerated, has trebled the customer usage of mobile contactless. Next slide, please. And this definitely proves the interest of this. An interesting thing also is to see how people are behaving. Previous to the pandemic, we had a sort of 50-50 customer usage of season tickets and of occasional tickets. And since the pandemic, we have seen a growing usage of tickets versus the seasonal fares. This also is very much impacted with the change in customer behavior. When you travel 2 times a week to your job instead of 5 times a week, then obviously the question of what is the best fare, what is the best way to optimize the cost of my public transportation is something that comes prevalent. And very much this opens the question of account-based ticketing, of pay-as-you-go, of fare capping, which is also a possibility and very much important in terms of MaaS. In terms of MaaS, the best way to pay is to be sure that you pay the best fare, whatever your customer usage is. And the customer usage of any form of transportation is something that is going to be very less regular in the next month than it was previously. Next slide, please. So some key takeaways. Definitely, closed loop brings very strong benefits, especially when it's based on open standards. I think that Philippe Vapro from Calypso is going to speak in a few minutes, and the use of open standards is something that is very beneficial to the transit authorities. Next slide, please. It brings a service that is now widely available on smartphones. We have roughly 2 billion smartphones which are NFC compatible worldwide, which is really a very strong asset for NFC. Next slide, please. And it is now easy to integrate into the existing apps or the mobile wallets, which also bring a lot of customer benefits. Next slide, please. And maybe the more important of all, it is very popular with travelers. And the pandemic has shown that the perceived hygiene of contactless is very strong in the development of customer usage. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Luis. Really great. Thanks for sharing a lot of that, the rider data. That's actually, it's always very interesting to see how things have gone. And you know, it shouldn't be any big surprise. You know, we've seen similar uptakes when it comes to contactless payment as well. So if you talk to a MasterCard and Visa, you'll hear similar changes in customer behavior over the last 18 months. So again, thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day. Actually, we'll see you back on the panel here in just a few minutes. Our next speaker, yeah, thank you. Our next speaker today is Steve Holden from ITSO, and I will just turn it over to him. There we go. And we'll talk about this particular case study. Good to see you this morning or this afternoon, Steve.
Yeah, indeed. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are. And hello and welcome. So yeah, my name is Steve Holden, and I'm the CEO of ITSO Limited, a membership organisation responsible for the UK-based ITSO smart ticketing technology. Today, I'd like to talk about our work implementing ITSO Mobile, our experiences and the benefits leveraging NFC has brought to the passenger experience, and how this will define our future technology roadmap. Whilst we are a technology company, our main focus is much about the passenger experience and how we can work together with our members to develop more compelling passenger experiences and ultimately make the transition to public transport easier. The experience needs to be simple, intuitive, and add value to the interaction. And working with members and technology partners, we have a unique position in the UK to support the work building back passenger numbers to transit. Next slide, please. But first, a little background on ITSO, our purpose and how we support members delivering public transport services. ITSO is a UK-based non-profit membership organisation that was founded in 2001. Our members are comprised of UK government, Scottish and Welsh administrations, primary transport executives, local authorities and commercial operators across multiple modes of transport. ITSO is a well-established digital ticketing technology which has already been deployed across the United Kingdom. We manage the specification of the licence from the Department for Transport, which defines a set of components used for the delivery of public transport ticketing. It provides transport operators with a capability to manage secure, contactless and flexible ticketing products. Each component within the infrastructure is certified to ensure interoperability across transport schemes, and it so provides the infrastructure that secures transactions from the network edge through to the back office. Together, these components form the infrastructure for the deployment of integrated smart ticketing schemes across the United Kingdom. These components provide the interoperability framework that has facilitated our ability to deliver multimodal, multi-operator contactless ticketing across the UK. And whilst ITSO's origins began with smart ticketing, it isn't smart card dependent. And we'll further extend our digital ticketing capabilities as it's clear that passenger choice is fundamental. I think it's also worth mirroring the point that's been made earlier about it's not about one or the other, it's about passenger choice and how passengers want to consume these products. So it's not mobile versus card, it's a blend of, and things will progress as time goes on. And this includes providing passengers with that choice of how they consume their public transport products. Next slide, please. So our purpose is based on making it easy for people to change to public transport, and making this transition as seamless as possible. So through collaboration with our membership, we've defined a ticketing standard which is available across the United Kingdom. We support our transport operator members in developing products that provide flexible, contactless and secure ticketing that focuses on the passenger experience foremost. Next slide, please. And by focusing on the passenger and making their experience seamless, it helps us work towards getting people out of cars and onto public transport. And as we increase public transport usage, we're also able to promote socially inclusive UK-wide mobility, ensuring that everyone is able to access these services, including the and underbanked, reducing carbon emissions across the board, but also improving air quality in urban areas, and decreasing road congestion by people leaving their cars at home and taking public transport. But the transition needs to be easy. Next slide, please. So in 2018, ITSO began working with Google to develop a mobile solution that virtualized an ITSO card into the Google Pay digital wallet. We were clear from the outset that the primary objective was that operators would need to leverage existing infrastructure investment, and the use of NFC was core to that delivery. With such a wide range of ticketing equipment across the United Kingdom, the challenge was significant. However, given the flexibility of the ITSO technology, NFC, and the collaborative nature of ITSO and the membership, we were able to deliver a solution which, when in the hands of passengers, receives incredibly positive and consistent feedback. To support our fulfillment requirement, we developed a digital ticketing aggregation platform that allows transport operators and retailers to fulfill ticket requests to Google Pay. And our APIs can be used by operators to manage issued tickets across an estate. And finally, the ITSO mobile business unit was then moved into a wholly owned subsidiary brand now known as Yotra. Next slide, please. The Yotra platform has been developed to support secure digital fulfillment services onto other mobile devices such as phone and wearable. The platform is architected to be completely wallet agnostic and can be linked to any current and future wallet provider solution. Operator retail channels integrate to the platform via APIs and have various abilities to issue and manage tickets. From there, we manage messaging through our fulfillment and trust services that orchestrate delivery to the wallet adapter. This is a specific integration that's used to securely deliver the ticket to the device. The GPay wallet contains an SDK we've developed that handles interaction with the ticketing data and also of the virtualization of the ITSO card, which interacts with the readers. Once the ticket is loaded, which only takes a couple of seconds, the device then interacts with the public transport infrastructure in the same manner a normal ITSO smart product would. Next slide, please. And you can see here from the GPay screen sequence that it takes from the initial setup through to activation and the delivery of the digital ticket. The sequence is intuitive and the passenger feedback has been, as I say, incredibly positive. The final three images on the right shows the detailed ticket information and usage screen when presenting the mobile to a reader. And these images show a Swift card, but they could equally have a different product to the wallet, such as a Nexus Pop card. Next slide, please. As I've mentioned, the phone interacts with the reader equipment, as would a normal ITSO smart card. Existing ITSO ticket products work in the same manner as do currently. And this is an important part, is that the infrastructure doesn't require mass upgrade and it works within that incumbent established investment that is across the UK. So new cards and tickets are able to be issued to the device within seconds, reducing lead times for card issuance, also the cost of the physical media, but also with recent silicon supply issues, sort of reducing that need to have that physical token, that physical card, and reliant on digital devices that are freely available and support that sort of passenger experience. But passengers now also have that detailed ticket information on screen, which can respond to push notifications. And as the passenger is using their wallet, they are in control of how these products are consumed. Next slide, please. Passenger behavior is key, and understanding how these products are used has helped us develop a better product. At the start of the project, I think it would be safe to say that this was purely around putting a ticket onto a phone, but the technology was only part of the solution. We needed to understand how these products were being used, what works and what doesn't. So shifting to a passenger mindset has helped hugely. Terminals' ability to interact with NFC devices was in the early part of the project quite time consuming. However, we've worked with all the major equipment suppliers to resolve issues and deliver a far better experience to the passengers. Older terminals also fell into not quite their category, but with lots of work and membership, collaboration there, we've been able to get these issues resolved, which is now presented a seamless experience for the passenger, and it just works, which is what we're looking for. Finally, mentioning card clash, which is something where you have multiple valid cards presented to the reader, which includes EMV cards. Now, working with Google, we brought about a change to GPay that allows for the transport card to be explicitly chosen, overriding all of the cards for a short period. And in practice, this works really well as the selection is explicit and the selection step is incredibly quick. And it continues to work when the screen is locked, so there's no need to constantly reopen the app. You can just take your phone, select it, and tap it onto the reader. Next slide, please. So, in summary, ITSO Mobile is delivering a great passenger experience and helping move our digital ticketing capabilities forward. Working with Google gives passengers a familiarity that increases adoption and satisfaction. ITSO is multimodal, which is available across the United Kingdom already, and provides the capability to deliver multi-operator ticketing. We've created an aggregation platform with a rich set of APIs that allows transport operators to manage their estates. And finally, extending this capability further, looking at concessionary passes and how we would present within the wallet and develop that product further. So thank you for your time. Hand over to the next presenter.
All right, thanks, Steve. Very interesting. Yeah, thank you so much. Our next speaker today, as we travel around the world, we're now coming to America. We will introduce Nicole Dupuy, who is with the APTA, if I got that right. Good morning.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. As was mentioned, my name is Nicole Dupuy, and I serve as the Director for Transit Technology and Innovation at the American Public Transportation Association, otherwise known as APTA. In my role at APTA, I have the opportunity to work with transit agencies all around the U.S., specifically with chief innovation officers. And what we're seeing is that transit agencies in the United States are developing pilots and programs that foster really a kind of fluid and linked transportation system, trying to incorporate all modes to really deliver people to their destination in a more seamless fashion, really kind of enabling that point-to-point trip. And as we see this kind of ebb and flow in the mobility ecosystem in the United States, and in response to users' mobility needs and new preferences, and now, of course, the challenge of the COVID-19 public health crisis, and the recovery and restoration of service that agencies are aiming for, the question really, I think, central to this conversation and my presentation today is what role will mobility as a service play in the U.S. transit system of the future? Next slide, please. So I want to start by giving everyone a quick overview of APTA, the American Public Transportation Association. It's a nonprofit international association. We have more than 1,500 public and private sector member organizations. It's the only association in North America that represents all modes of public transportation, including bus, paratransit, light rail, commuter rail, subways, waterborne services, and intercity and high-speed passenger rail. So more than 90% of the people using public transportation in the United States are and Canada are riding an APTA member system. So that just gives you a little context about what we are and what we do. Next slide, please. Next, I want to sort of level set this conversation by offering a definition of mobility as a service. I think you could ask 100 people and maybe get a different definition, you know, get 101 definitions of mobility as a service. But I'm going to offer a definition of MaaS as it relates to transit, or at least how APTA thinks of MaaS. So we think of it as a type of service that you know, through a joint digital channel enables users to plan, book, pay for multiple types of mobility services. I often think of it as emerging from some of the earlier notions or discussions about mobility management, or even the notion of the complete trip, which, you know, those took place essentially, like, you know, several years ago. But really, I think MaaS kind of emerged from those conversations. The concept describes kind of a shift away from personally owned vehicles or even single mode trips toward mobility provided as a service, or in a complete trip provision. And it's enabled by combining transportation services, of course, from the public and private sector, ultimately through a unified gateway that creates or manages the trip, in which users can pay with a single account. So in some versions of MaaS, users can pay per trip or a monthly fee for limited distance, although admittedly we haven't seen a ton of that in the United States. But the key concept behind MaaS is that it offers mobility solutions based on the unique needs and trip needs of users. Next slide, please. So as we all know, at this point, in many ways, the concept of MaaS hinges on two types of innovation, and I want to create this distinction here. We have innovation in business or service models, and then innovation in terms of new technologies we use to make transit more user-focused. Technology has really impacted the way the mobility ecosystem has functioned in the last 10 to 15 years in a way that almost feels like a 100-year punctuation. For the better part of the century, at least in the United States, we've thought about getting around in one way, predominantly, maybe with slight variations here or there. But we've seen in the last 10 or 15 years, technology, infrastructure, big tech really affect everything from culture to efficiency to day-to-day social interactions. And of course, in the context of transit, the expectations that riders have for how they will plan their trip, the information they will have access to, and how that trip will go for them. So, you know, technology is a huge game changer in the mobility space. Of course, it will also have impacts and influence over information, customer and agency security. And when we talk about MaaS, it's really an idea, I think, that hinges on all these different types of innovations. Of course, technology is essential to that, but it's also service and business model innovation. Next slide, please. So I want to just talk about, you know, when we're talking about MaaS, we're not necessarily just talking about one specific thing. We're talking about kind of a movement toward all of these sorts of different innovations that make MaaS possible or make MaaS work. So, you know, trip planning tools, many agencies are working toward improving the granularity of trip data that they're making available to their riders. Some are doing this by improving trip planning tools, making them more multimodal, enables riders to have information not just about transit options that are available to them, but also other mobility options, both public and private in their ecosystem. It enables riders to use multiple modes of transport, including transit, for a complete trip. With the COVID-19 public health crisis, we've seen many U.S. transit agencies working hard to get riders back. That was mentioned in a previous presentation by one of my colleagues on the panel. And doing this, trying to make it easier by improving the tools and the data granularity available to riders. So this is definitely a trend that we've seen kind of post-COVID. Next slide, please. Again, in building on that, we're seeing a lot of U.S. transit agencies really try to up their game in terms of the real-time vehicle information that they're offering. So through the use of GTFS and widespread adoption of smartphones, today's transit riders have a much better view of their mobility options with real-time transit arrival data. Riders can track locations of buses and trains using GTFS real-time data, as well as other mobility options that might be in the vicinity, such as bike share, private mobility services that might enable them to complete the first and last miles of their trips. And it really facilitates their ability to bring mobility options together to meet their unique needs or to create that complete trip that they need. Next slide, please. In terms of fare payment, we've heard a lot about that today from other presenters. We've seen a ton of transit systems doing really upgrading their revenue collection systems and their fare media. Many systems are doing away with paper fare cards and moving to a somewhat cashless system in which the smart card is used. In many cases, one card in this case can be used on multiple systems or modes in a region. So some examples of that include WMATA in Washington, D.C., the ORCA card that's used in the Seattle area, or CTA's fare card in Chicago, in the Chicagoland area. Next slide, please. And then, of course, something else we've heard a ton about today is that so many systems are moving to open and contactless fare payment. Transportation agencies are really increasingly moving toward touchless or contactless electronic ticketing options to both reduce costs, obtain better data, offer joint fares with connecting services, reduce boarding times, and in some cases introduce incentives and rewards to ride. This really has been, to my mind, the focus du jour, especially in the context of the pandemic, when contactless payment is super important for safety reasons. I think it's important to mention that a lot of systems had already had these upgrades underway prior to the pandemic, and the pandemic in some ways sort of made them more of an important priority. So they kind of pushed these projects, this movement to open and contactless fare payment up on the list of priorities. In the past, open and contactless pretty much referred exclusively to smart card or a credit debit schema, but today we're also, of course, talking about mobile. So we have smartphones, wearables, and the operating systems we're dealing with primarily are Android and iOS. Studies have shown that riders are more likely to use mobile phones than contactless cards. So that's, I think, a trend that we should expect in the future. And then, of course, you know, there are several variations of this. You know, we could talk a little bit about Bluetooth payment flow, like gateless fare collection, remote sensors that kind of provide hands-free fare validation. Again, something we haven't seen a lot of in the US, but definitely can be counted as a forthcoming trend. Next slide, please. Mobility on demand microtransit. I just want to talk a little bit about this for a second. Many systems are starting to implement mobility on demand as part of their MaaS efforts. Transit agencies are implementing these kind of microtransit solutions that improve the riders' experience by operating small-scale on-demand public transit services that can offer fixed routes and schedules, as well as flexible routes and on-demand scheduling. So it operates like an Uber or a Lyft, but the technology companies create a digital routing and ride-hailing platform for the transit agency. You know, I think that there's kind of two sides to this coin. Part of the reason COVID has sort of prompted this is because systems have had to take a good hard look at their routes and service to determine what is underperforming and where alternatives to fixed route transit might be appropriate. This happened in suburban Detroit. Their smart bus line took a major ridership hit during the COVID crisis, and they converted some of their fixed routes to advanced reservation shuttles or kind of mobility on demand service. But I think it's important to acknowledge that also the pandemic has prompted transit agencies to use this as a solution to augment service, you know, kind of as an emergency response, because transit is so critical to so many communities, because you know, we think of it as the backbone of the mobility system. We need to make sure we are meeting people's needs during this most difficult time. So mobility on demand offers a solution there as well. And an example of that is Houston Metro. They recently debuted an app that allows riders to book trips with existing on-demand shuttles, and it's got like an Uber-like interaction. Next slide, please. Next, I want to segue into a few case studies of U.S. agencies who have implemented new fare technologies with MaaS in mind. The first one I'll talk about is LA Metro in Los Angeles, California. They have their new TAP system. One of the things they recently debuted was these TAP Flex wristbands, which this new technology allows for easier payment for customers, especially customers with disabilities. It is a one-stop central payment for transit, bike share, microtransit, fare subsidy programs, parking, electric vehicle car sharing, and more, pretty much everything in their ecosystem. They also, you know, launched a partnership with Transit app, Transit the app. They have done away with their own app, in-house app, and they will be working with the Transit the app to promote better multimodal trips, craft personalized service alerts, include accessibility tools for people with mobility challenges. And it really gets back to meeting that unique need for each rider and creating one portal through which all mobility needs can be met and paid for. Next slide, please. The second case I want to offer up is the Chicago Transit Authority. We have seen them receive a grant through the Mobility on Demand Sandbox program through the Federal Transit Administration to modify their existing Ventra app, which is their all-inclusive app that allows people to access mobility services in the area, so that they can access Chicago's Divvy bike share system. So the new features will allow the Ventra app users to locate Divvy bike share stations, view bike and dock availability, and seamlessly pay for Divvy passes through the app as well. So early fare integration programs such as Chicago's Ventra program allow users to buy tickets for multiple area agencies using one fare card or app already. But they haven't really achieved that seamless functionality, but that is their ultimate goal, is to replicate that you know, one gateway model. Next slide, please. And finally, I wanted to highlight Omni, which stands for One Metro New York. It's the New York MTA's new fare payment system that they're rolling out. It allows you to use your own contactless card or smart device to make fare payments and enter the transit system. And they are hoping to conclude this rollout by 2023, at which point much to the chagrin of many people, many riders, they will do away with the beloved Metro card. So after the Omni project is fully complete in 2023, MTA will say goodbye to the Metro card for good. I'm sure it will be a very sad occasion, but they will move fully to the Omni system. This was mentioned earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning again. There are a number of, shall we say, unresolved conversations underway in association with movement to contactless open contactless and open fare payment systems, issues of equity and access. How do we accommodate riders who are unbanked or maybe don't have a smartphone or smart device? There are some systems that are doing some really unique things to address this, but I think it's still really important to mention. So, you know, as always, technology is never a silver bullet. There are always issues and challenges that come along with this, and you know, we have to work to, you know, ensure that everybody is served. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to talk through some of the critical steps as we think about movement toward mobility as a service. What can systems do, transit systems do, to become mobility as a service or MaaS ready? So first and foremost, there needs to be a broad vision and strategy. We need to articulate this at the local level. What is the problem we're trying to solve? What is the challenge we're trying to address? There needs to be this kind of compelling vision and the political will to implement that vision, to achieve policy alignment. So this means there needs to be coordination between city, regional governments, transit agencies, MPOs, all of those actors in the kind of policy space, and all of the you know, all of the policy frameworks involving parking, congestion pricing, road pricing, land use, traffic management. They all play a large role in the ultimate success of MaaS. So that's incredibly important. We need to be prepared on multiple levels. There, you know, are preconditions for MaaS at the community level that include determination on technical readiness, willingness for cooperation between service providers, the rules of engagement between partners, especially on data governance, robustness of the public transit systems. All of that is incredibly important. We need to develop protocols for data. I think this has been spoken to. I won't get into it a ton, but you know, MaaS will generate a continuous wealth of data on ridership, travel patterns. So private companies involved in MaaS are often data companies, and so there need to be protocols for how we deal with it, how we manage and protect data and protect individuals as well. Test, fail, and succeed. We need more experimentation and pilots on this. We definitely have not saturated that. A competitive program could potentially be launched at the federal level, but we need to test more. We need to have updated performance indicators to measure the success of integrated and shared use mobility systems. So if an integrated MaaS network increases ridership on a transportation system, you know, the increased ridership might not be the appropriate goal or intended outcome or appropriate metric. So we need to rethink a lot of the metrics that we use. We need to find synergies and new partnerships. I think this goes without saying. We need to have partnerships between technology companies, automakers, cities, universities, research institutions, planning organizations. Everyone has to work together to make this work. We have to develop new procurement approaches. You know, as we get deeper and deeper into technology and purchasing technology and interoperability, we need to really rethink our procurement systems in the public sector. We need to focus on public and policy education. US communities may face cultural resistance to transformational change like this, especially if it goes up against personal ownership of cars. So we need to make sure we're telling a story to elected officials and the public about the role of public transportation as the backbone of the mobility ecosystem, but how important well-integrated shared use mobility is for all sorts of things, including congestion relief, more efficient land use, etc. And finally, but last but not least, we must understand and place value on social equity and access for all. You know, we have to understand that any shift in the mobility space might exacerbate mobility inequity or cause other social disbenefits such as traffic congestion. Ultimately, our goal needs to be serving all communities, and a policy framework that supports that needs to be put in place. Next slide, please. I'll just go really quickly. I want to reinforce that I think one of the interesting things about Transit's turn toward technology is that it has, really kind of reoriented Transit to be more customer centric. I think that's ultimately the goal, and we've seen even more of that with COVID-19. And so ultimately, as we think about adopting new business models like MaaS, we need to think about how we can meet that ultimate goal of enabling users to be better informed, make safer, more coordinated, smarter use of mobility networks, which I feel like is the ultimate goal here. Final slide. And this is just my contact information. I so appreciate your time, and I apologize for going over time here. If anyone has any questions, feel free to contact me via email or any other means. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nicole. And sorry for jumping on there for a second. I thought that was your last slide. So next up for today, we have Philippe from Calypso Network Association, and we'll be talking about some of the services and experiences they've been having. Good afternoon, Philippe.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, good afternoon to all. So today I represent the Calypso Networks Association, which manages the Calypso standard. We are not providers of an NFC solution, but I would like to explain first in few words what is Calypso and what we propose to help the development of NFC services available for the MaaS development. In the second point of this presentation, I think interesting to share a few words with you and the consequences of the sanitary crisis and what impacts it can have on ticketing and MaaS development and generally speaking on public transport. So next slide, please. So first of all, what is Calypso? Calypso is an open standard on ticketing, which has the originality to have been designed by transport operators and authorities, not coming from the industry world, but coming from the world of users. It specificates a fast and secure contactless ticketing transaction, which is based on NFC technology, because it is the best solution for the fast throughput at transport locations, for the flow of passengers that we have in mass transit. It is used across different media, of course, cards, paper tickets, cards, but also smartphones and wearables today. It is suitable for whatever kind of schemes for the architecture of the ticketing system. That means media-based or account-based ticketing system. And it evolves, of course, to go on with the needs of the users, and particularly today with the needs of mobility as a service. I would add to this that an open standard as Calypso, NFC open standard, it is a closed loop ticketing scheme, of course. And I would say that closed loop open standard NFC represent today also a key for the sovereignty, digital sovereignty that you can have on your ticketing, and it's also true for the MaaS. Next slide, please. Calypso is worldwide deployed, of course, in 20 different countries, in different continents. Most important also to add here, it is a technology whose products are all certified following a scheme of certifications, which ensure interoperability and compatibility of the development of the different manufacturers. As it is an open standard, the software of the cars, the software of the different portable objects can be developed by many different manufacturers, but the users, the operators, the authority require that they can buy to whatever manufacturer without any problem. So a certification ensures the compatibility and the interoperability of the solutions. Next slide, please. So Calypso Networks Association, it's an association, a not-for-profit association, regrouping more than 100 members coming from the transport sector, transport operators, transport authorities, but also from the industry, the car manufacturer, components, terminal manufacturers, integrators, ticketing integrators, and many others. Next slide, please. What are Calypso solutions for MaaS and for, more generally speaking, NFC? We have a lot of different specifications because our main goal is to specify solutions which are taken by the industry and transformed into products which are sold to the operators and to the authorities. But I would stress today on two aspects: the Calypso for mobile, because it enables to benefit from the Calypso advantages on a smartphone and NFC solutions, wearables also, and Calypso for terminals, because there we offer open source SDK and APIs, whose name is Eclipse Keeper, based on the Eclipse platform. The most interesting here, when we are speaking of MaaS, is that often users, operators, authorities which implement MaaS solutions don't have the intention to take NFC as a solution for their MaaS deployment, because often the actors in the MaaS mobility as a service are small actors providing bikes, scooters, and things like this, and they are often, they think at least, not to have the skills and resources to implement NFC solutions, which are often considered as more complex to develop than QR code, for example. And so we think that it is very important to bring to the developers of MaaS solutions tools which enables to have a very simple access to a very performant ticketing solution with the best ergonomy of the NFC, but enabling to do it in a simple way and to simplify the development. That's, I think, a booster for the MaaS, for NFC to be really the relevant technology used for the mobility as a service applications. Next slide, please. So Calypso for mobile, what it is, we provide both an applet, a software which is dedicated to be used for Java card, for Java components. That means it is hardware and software solution. It is delivered free of charge, of course, to all the members with the highest level of security. The main interest, I think, it requires no adaptation of the existing ticketing infrastructure. And so it has an interest to be able to be deployed relatively quickly. HCE, of course, we provide a specification for HCE, which is implemented by manufacturers. Of course, as HCE is less secure as the secure element, we also provide guidelines in order to reinforce the level of security of this kind of solution with measures, countermeasures at the system level. And we provide also a certification scheme, a security certification scheme, in order for the manufacturer to be able to provide to their users, to the operators, to the authorities, something which guarantee a level of security of the situation of the solutions they are buying. Next slide, please. So also a very big interest of this open solution is that means that it can be you can find this solution on many different Java platforms today. As it was told, there are many different components which are used as secure element in the smartphones. And the interest here is that our Calypso applet is available on many different platforms from the most important manufacturers of Java platform, which are used in the smartphones as secure element. You see them on this slide. Next slide, please. So today there are some NFC deployments with Calypso. Not so many as mobility as a service, because mobility as a service is still emerging, and there are not so many deployments or significant deployments, let's say, in different countries. But with the ticketing for the transit operations, we have the deployment, it has been told by Ribos some minutes ago, Île-de-France, Strasbourg, Lille, Toulouse, Nice. Next slide, please. And some others are done with HCE. The first one I was speaking were more on secure elements. These ones are based on HCE deployments in France, in Italy, in Portugal. There are this kind of deployments based on our specifications and our security measures. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share with you some reflections about the post-COVID impact on public transport, not on all topics about public transport, but at least on ticketing and development of the MaaS. We know, after analyzing what's going on during this pandemic, that the behaviors and the needs of citizens are moving. First important point to take into account is the home working increase. For example, in the Paris region, home working was about 1% in 2018, and we know that it will be about 15% in 2022 after COVID. During COVID, it was pandemic, it was about 25 to 30%, but it will be less, but about 15%. The second topic, which is very important, there will be a new balance between mass transit and new mobilities, bikes, scooters. In Paris too, we have seen an increase of 25% of use of bikes in the city. Of course, it's important. It remains very few compared to mass transit, but it means that people are modifying their way to be mobile in the city. Of course, it will remain for some years a requirement to avoid crowds, queues, and things like this. So a need for at least offer social distancing. So ticketing must adapt to these new behaviors, and we have to accelerate the flow of passengers. Contactless, of course, is today the best solution. Unfortunately, we migrated to contactless years ago. Today, it's more and more important to offer to our customer quick access at ticket gates, remote sales in order to avoid crowds at the booth or at the vending equipment. But also, we have to propose adapted tarification, as it has been yet said, because people will not stay in the same way to use, let's say, flat fee subscription, monolithic tarification, because they want to be able to use transport, the means of transport at the last minute, the one they select, and to compare and to see the best one, and to decide at the last minute what they want to do. For example, between using their bike or the mass transit, depending on the meteo and the weather and all this. So we have also to take into account the new complementarity between mass transit and the individual means of transport. Next slide, please. So I think that we may speak about three pillars of the post-COVID ticketing situation in mobility and transport. and I would say in 3 words: NFC, pay-as-you-go, and mobility as a service. Contactless NFC, of course, because it's the best economy for the customer. It allows the speed of transactions that we require to avoid queues or to optimize flows of passengers, to optimize the commercial speed within the buses. For example, we do not have to forget also the buses. That's very important. Security, of course, of the transaction remains a key of contactless NFC. And something which is less often said is the reliability and resistance to vandalism. Unlike the QR code, for example, it is very resilient, the use of NFC. Pay-as-you-go, because it is the best answer to this new behavior of customers which want to pay the actual travel that they do and be able to choose at the last minute what they want to do, and not to be tariffed and something they have not done. So really, with best pricing, with the fair capping and pay as you go, we have a solution to answer to these needs for flexibility in the use of mobility. And finally, of course, mobility as a service, because people will more and more use complementarily mass transit and other means of transport, and we have to help them and to accompany them in order to offer a seamless travel from A to B, simple and efficient. I think that's a way to define the mobility as a service also. So next slide, please. I thank you strongly for your attention, and I give back the word to Mike.
All right, thank you, Philippe. Our last speaker of our case studies before we transition to the panel is Stephanie with, I'm gonna get this conduent vision. I will turn it over to her and we will move through this last particular case study in France.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm really pleased to be with you today for this NFC Open Forum. So my name is Stéphanie Deprat-Deplan from Conduent, and I'm in charge of our product development for our public transport line of business. So you understand that MaaS is at the heart of my current concerns. It's a little bit difficult to be the last speaker because a lot has already been said. However, I will try to bring you some new inputs, and I will share with you the Conduent's vision about MaaS. Next slide, please. First of all, some background information. So for me, there are two main figures to remember. 44% of users preferred shared mobility and 2-digit % decline in driving license. I think we all have seen this, particularly with young adults. You know, at another time, the driving license was an achievement, but now it's just an option. The young people, but not only, are very agile in their travel behavior. An electric scooter one day and a shared car the next, and then a bike and so on. So I think that our role is to facilitate this flexibility in access to multimodal transport. And we are lucky because in Europe, we are a pioneer, as already highlighted in previous presentations. A lot of cities are experimenting MaaS. Next slide, please. So for us at Conduent, the MaaS is about putting the right tool in the hands of public authorities so that they are in real control of their transit policies. Next, please. but in fact, the MaaS has many definitions, and it is a matter of perspective. For the transport authorities, I think it's about the management of an aggregated mobility offer and facilitating access to mobility, encouraging citizens to change their travel habits. For service providers, the challenge is to propose the right model in line with the authorities' expectation. From our point of view, two main approaches are possible. As a commercial integrator with open API, or through a unique platform with different level of service integration. Finally, for the last player, the traveler, he wants to get around thanks to a mobile app that allows him to plan and pay and at any time his trips according to his preferences. Next, please. From our point of view, there is three different key points for the MaaS solution, MaaS platform, and I will go through them in more details in the next slides. First, the necessity for the service provider and integrators to be flexible and agile. Secondly, the crucial nature of data quality and the expectations of authorities in terms of analytics capability. The third point is to really understand this notion of single access point for the traveler and other stakeholders. Next, please. So when we say flexible and agile, what does that mean? The MaaS platform needs to be intermodal, a unified and consistent multimodal platform that integrates public transport and private mobility is expected for most transit policies. Municipal leaders understand the advantages to optimizing customer journeys for the best user experience. This is needed for a real door-to-door mobility model that would help change travel habits. Secondly, a scalable platform is required. Transport authorities have the responsibility of mobility in their area. A flexible MaaS platform provides the opportunity to manage all mobility providers in one single place. The platform should also enable adding and replacing providers when necessary. Finally, different perimeter need to be addressed. Flexible MaaS platform can be implemented in different contexts. It can be urban, regional, or even countrywide. The objective and policy of MaaS is linked to the needs of the traveler and area. For example, in a urban area, it can reduce congestion. It can be an important instrument in stopping territorial and social fracturing. Next, please. Second important topic, data quality and analytics capability. This is based first of all on a unique data repository. A strong MaaS platform is likely to become the unique source of data for travelers and help them make decisions about a specific trip, but also about travel habits. When it comes to intermodal travel, options increase, and having information is very helpful in selecting the best one. So some travelers may want the fastest trip, others may be incentivized by cost, some may want the most eco-friendly option. Then you need some smart algorithm. AI and machine learning are leveraged to better understand mobility habits for continuous improving and innovation. AI helps connect all data points to create a real, a clear picture about mobility needs and guides decision-making while taking into account public policy objectives. Depending on the level of integration expected by the MaaS platform, analysis depth can be different, either juxtaposed or aggregated. Next, please. Last, focus this notion of a single access point. The traveler expects a personalized experience. The MaaS platform is built for interoperability, and it becomes a point of access for managing a complex intermodal network. Its complexity is not perceived by the user thanks to the backend solution. For agencies, with MaaS, multimodal network become manageable, both for the agencies that put in place the platform, as well for the private mobility providers selected. So the platform is based on an aggregate sales management distribution model, also on a complex set of fare and clearing rules and so on. For travelers with MaaS, having a end-to-end user experience means having one mobility account for trip planning, ticket purchasing, travel, and even post-travel services, all within one mobile app powered by a platform that can deliver efficient multimodal traveler information and intermodal planner with a real mobility repository. With MaaS, all travelers received one bill in their accounts and have post-payment options, even with multimodal journeys. Here, obviously, the smartphone is at the heart of the solution with all its means of communication, mainly NFC with OSCARD emulation or SIM-centric approach, NFC reader, but also barcode reading, SMS, and Bluetooth. Next, please. To conclude on the conjoint approach, a high-level architecture diagram that summarizes the different components required for MaaS. So you can find in the middle the business components with trip planners, sales, and single accounts. At the bottom, the layer of real-time interfaces with the service providers. At the top, the abstraction layer that unifies interfaces for the front end, so as a website, mobile app. Next, please. So now in the field, our MaaS project in Hauts-de-France. So Hauts-de-France is in the north of France. Next, please. So PaaS project, it's the name of the project, but also the name of the contactless card deployed. So what were the goals of this project? Clearly, it was stopping the social fracturing with better multimodal passenger information, with an interoperable ticketing, and above all, fare integration. So next. So some figures to be more specific. So PaaS project, it's 4 million inhabitants in the territory. It's 650,000 cards deployed, 35 networks of transportation of different kind of networks, so urban, intercity, regional, and linked with Belgium. It's 14 mobility services other than public transport with bicycle, car parking, self-service vehicle, car sharing, cab, carpooling, and so on. And it's 150,000 mobility points with 3,700 lines. So this project was complex and has been deployed in several steps. Next, please. The project started in 2017, and in the first stage, it was more focused on the passenger information with the websites, then information about schedules and tariffs of all partners, then trip planner for multimodal information, and the integration progressively of each service provider, carpooling, electric charging station, and so on. Then the appearance of the mobile app, first just with the trip planner. After that, online sales has been introduced on website and are now available on mobile app. And the last steps will concern the real-time information and disruption. So as you can see, it's a huge project that covers the global scope of a MaaS solution. And I think it's a really great achievement for a MaaS ecosystem. Next. And that's the end. Thanks for your attention.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. The next topic on the agenda is to move to the panel. So Parti is going to be the moderator, and I'll ask our speakers to turn back on their cameras, quote, return to the stage, if you will. And I'll be turning this over to Parti. One housekeeping item, I do want to remind the attendees of the webinar today that if you do have a question, we are going to be taking them from the audience. You can do that from your control panel by using the controls tab, or sorry, not the control, the questions tab, to be able to submit your question. I know Parti's prepared some to get us going, but we're more than welcome to take some from the audience as well. I will turn it over to you, Parti, and when we're done at the very end, Parti, toss it back to me so I can do some last minute housekeeping on the networking session.
Yes, we'll do that. Can you hear me good, Mike?
Yes, we're good.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. And thanks to all the speakers. It was very enlightening to hear you all talk about MaaS and about mobility solutions driven by your respective organizations. I would like to start with Stephanie because you just now completed sharing with us how MaaS is implemented in France. What made you decide to implement a MaaS solution, and do you have more planned?
So I think that MaaS is really the natural next step after interoperability in e-ticketing system, after trip planner and passenger information. Every solution, every stakeholders try to regroup and to be able to offer better services to the final user. So for us, it's really natural. It's the next step after e-ticketing. So I think that just after MaaS platform, we are working on a multi-service platform. You know, here MaaS it's just for mobility, but the step just after is for every city services.
Interesting. So we are thinking about, you're thinking about also going beyond MaaS. That's amazing. I'll move to Luis. How is the implementation of MaaS going in RAPT?
Well, the Paris region is not only RITP, which is the Paris Metro, but is defined by the Transit Authority, which is the Paris region. And it's quite interesting because, in fact, they already had an interoperable transit card, which is a Navigo card. They decided to move that onto the mobile. And definitely, we are really at the beginning of the MaaS story, because right now, what is enabled is the ability for customers to have information on public transit and to purchase tickets using their mobile phone. But we are really on the verge of adding new services. I think Philippe was very interesting in defining the fact that now customers do use bikes, car sharing, scooters, and that is really something that is starting to change. And when you walk in the streets of Paris, people who were usually just taking mass transit previously, buses and metros, they really are now making daily decisions according to the weather, according to the occupation of the metros and buses. The occupation of vehicles is something that is very important now for customers. It always has been, but even more now. They prefer to move in a sort of sole environment with nobody around them on a scooter, but not to be in mass transit. So I think really now MaaS, which was very much a buzzword in the recent years, and which was very trendy, but not very much used by customers, I should say, is something that is really starting to fit into what the passengers do expect in the way they will move in the future.
So the way they will move in the future, we have been listening to MaaS implementations in France, and I would like to know more. So I move to you, Philippe. CNA reaches, so your extent reaches to regions of the world, providing you a unique perspective. What are your thoughts of MaaS in Africa, Mexico, and other regions that don't come first in mind when discussing MaaS?
Yes, indeed. We have many relationships in these countries, in Africa, in Latin America, Mexico, South America, and we are speaking with them of ticketing. But yes, now the mobility as a service is really well known globally, I think, and there is a strong demand of local actors for mobility as a service. And when we think to it, we can say that it is indeed very normal and understandable, because the alternative means of transport are already existing in these countries. Not necessarily sustainable, we have to say, but when we are speaking of the small cabs in Morocco or the mini buses in Senegal or other countries, that means that our means of transport for only 2, 3, 5 people which travel together, and there is a real need in these countries which is going the same way as on mobility as a service, even if it's not exactly mobility as a service, but a means for the local authority to regulate this means of transport, this small means of transport. And so they are doing it by organizing this means of transport, and it's really a same concept than the mobility as a service, but they want to, because they want to have a single, let's say, application in order to access in a compatible way to all these means of transport. So the stake is maybe more to organize these paired means of transport than MaaS, but at the end, they are doing MaaS.
Yeah, so everybody's trying to make it better. And we have the first question from audience meanwhile, and I would call this question to Steve. It seems that NFC is a better solution for MaaS than QR code. Why is that so, Steve?
An emotive question, I'm sure. I think what you see is there's lots of use cases, and again, we always come back to the passenger. What's the experience like for that engagement? And there is no one size fits all. But I think in terms of the wireless technologies, in terms of NFC, the ability to, the speed of execution, the ability to orientate the phone to the reading device, because clearly if you, perhaps those who live in London are aware of, you've got the sort of the code readers on the front of the devices, you have to orient the phone, which could be quite expensive at a particular angle. You know, when you look at these devices, you can just place them next to the beep and you go through. So that type of engagement, type of experience, or whether it's a wearable, I think, you know, provides quite a natural sort of use case, and from a passenger point of view, just fits into that model quite nicely. Now, clearly there are, again, benefits of using QR code, because, you know, say one size doesn't fit all. But I think from that engagement point of view, the ability to just use your wrist or use your sort of the device, you can just place it in the reader and then you're through. So I think that's, you know, quite a compelling reason why you would use an NFC device, but clearly, you know, everybody's choices are slightly different and preferences differ.
Thank you, Steve. And I'll move across the Atlantic to Nicole. Compared to other regions in the world, you were sharing a few examples of how MaaS was implemented. MaaS solutions are there in US as well. When you compare what you have seen in the US to other regions of the world, what do you think is the extent and level of MaaS adoption in US?
That's a great question. I think that certainly there's variability depending on, you know, the size of the region, the robustness of the transit system within the region, or the mobility ecosystem within the region. I think in an odd way, COVID-19, which has been a collective experience worldwide, has really reinforced the importance of transit and moved the needle in terms of US transit systems needing to be more customer-centric or user-focused. So probably prior to COVID-19, we kind of saw this very incremental, sclerotic movement toward technology adoption or MaaS model adoption, whereas you know, we were moving toward adopting all these various technologies that kind of support MaaS as a concept, but even if it wasn't called out or identified as such. I think what I have kind of seen, at least in terms of US transit systems, kind of in the post-COVID period, as we're focused on recovery and restoration of service, is this real reorientation toward user-focused transit service, really ensuring that we're not only, you know, running the trains, so to speak, but making sure we're meeting the needs of the community. That was a message that I think really resonated, or really kind of percolated to the surface, was the importance of public transit and the social safety net and in serving communities. So I think maybe that's to the kind of thing that stimulated US transit agencies to really try to reorient themselves toward more user focused and more user metrics, and also kind of really embrace some of those technologies for that reason, not just because you know, it's the shiny new toy to kind of plug into your transit system. So you know, certainly there are other places in the world, other regions in the world that have far exceeded US transit systems in terms of MaaS. But I do think that, you know, just in very recent times, we're seeing a real movement toward that notion of providing a complete trip for the rider within US transit systems.
Yeah, I agree. COVID has given us a collective experience which I don't think we wanted to, and we want, but there is a silver lining in that dark cloud. Some of the digitalization topics which were taking long were speeded up. And we have another question from the audience. And this is for you, Stephanie, because you were sharing some of the implementations of MaaS in France. What is the key to making a blended passenger experience work in MaaS, in your view?
Oh, difficult question. I think it's really important to understand that each customer, each traveler expect a personalized experience. And in this project in Hauts-de-France, there was a strong focus around the preferences of customers. And it's the mobile app, for example, is really based on every parameters that each customer could choose. So each customer has his own experience with his mobile app for his trip planning, trip planner, and for his purchasing. So customer experience, I think.
Surely, a lot of it is driven by customer experience. Philip, I have a question. Again, another audience question for you. European cities have MaaS deployment underway. How many are there worldwide?
A difficult question. I have no precise figures about this. I think of course, the world is not only Calypso. Unfortunately, the world is not only Calypso. So I do not have many figures. But you know, even in the world of Calypso, it's often difficult to get these figures and to know exactly what our members, our cities are implementing. For example, we discovered recently that some members in Israel implemented NFC services based on iPhone. That was the first in the world of Calypso, but we discovered later after they did it. So it's quite difficult. It remains few at this stage. I think that what we have to do now, really, I think the concept of MaaS is well established, that we have solutions, that we have, but it remains to deploy and deploy it, as it was said, because often it remains speech, we have to say MaaS, and now it begins to be on the field, but really it has to be increased on the field. I think that Wizway, Conduent, which are there, are deploying now many new NFC solutions for MaaS, but it remains very few compared to what MaaS Transit has to do with ticketing and things like this. So for me, really the stake now is deployment and to make a real use by people of these solutions.
Thank you. That was a difficult question, but our audience is unforgiving in this case. So, Steve, as a leader of ITSO, you've fought and won a lot of battles. So what's your advice for increasing the adoption and advancing MaaS?
Absolutely listen to your customers, listen to your passengers, look at what they need, what they want, and deliver the value to them. We, you know, as technologists can get wrapped up in the lower level details of how these things are done, but we really need to understand why they need to be done, and going to the heart of that really answers those questions that are being asked of the passengers, and giving them, you know, as I said earlier, that reason to move from their cars, privately owned cars, into public transport. So being able to provide those experiences and understanding why you're providing those experiences, I think, is absolutely fundamental. And that the other consideration I would say as well is that not one size fits all. There are lots of different use cases of how, when, where to implement. And I think that's important to consider. And I would also concur with the need for standardization. Is it as a specification body, and likewise with Calypso, having that standardization there allows innovation. It allows people to build services, add value, but while understanding that there is a common component set by which they can integrate and it will work. So it's allowing sort of those more sort of passenger-centric activities to be explored and to be sort of built on with a confidence that you know when you implement this particular piece of technology that it will work across an estate. So yeah, I think it's that sort of blend of understanding why we are doing what we're doing to get passengers onto public transport and how we then deliver those services and bring them about.
Thank you. And I will take the liberty of being a little selfish here because having all of you here with me and having me have the chance to ask this question. So this question goes to all of you, and I'll go as per the screen. As you appear on my screen. What is the #1 way NFC can make a substantial difference in MaaS, in your opinion? And I'll start with Nicole because you appear at the top left corner of my screen.
Lucky #1. So I think that, as we see more US transit agencies embracing open and contactless fare payment specifically, because I think that's central to our discussion here. So with that movement toward a new revenue collection, new fare media, transit agencies have to think about so many different things, from what kind of policies and regulatory frameworks they have in place, to interoperability standards, to just things like how you handle customer service, the types of questions and troubleshooting and experience and knowledge that a customer service agent at a transit agency needs is so very different compared to what they may have traditionally been dealing with. So I think it takes anytime you adopt a new technology or a new business model, there's this domino effect in terms of other parts of the organization, or in this case, the service that you're providing. So I think there's a real need for that sort of infrastructural support, if that makes sense. It's not just how do we use this shiny new technology or this new thing. It's how do we ensure we've kind of put our money where our mouth is, and our agency as an organization operationally can actually support embracing MaaS as a business model. So I don't know if that's a great answer to your question, but I think it's kind of not necessarily the technology, it's all of the other stuff, right? All of the other stuff that follows, all of the other challenges on the business side and the technology side.
Yeah, so infrastructure is key as well, right?
Yeah,
Stephanie, sorry.
So I agree with Nicole, but I think that NFC is a technology, a mean of communication, but the important thing is to explain clearly to public authorities how to use it. And there is a lot of ways to use NFC. So public authorities has to have a clear picture of their goals and objectives about MaaS before choosing what way to use NFC. So I think we have a role a strong role in explaining how to use it to respond to their specific expectations, specific objective, to manage their MaaS solution, MaaS platform. We have to be teacher.
Yeah, how to use and educate, right? So that's one of the things in any case. Good. Philippe?
Yes, I fully agree what's said by Stephanie. Educate, because it's very complex for the operators, for the authorities, the choice that they have to make. There are so many solutions, technological solutions, schemes of architecture, many things. And I really think that sometimes they are not aware of the advantages, the benefits, the performances of what one technology can bring to compare to another one. I think we have to focus on the customer experience and the user experience. And that's the key for the success of NFC, because I am very convinced that the performances, the ergonomic, of NFC is really the best. It was yet true 20 years ago, because that's the story of an old guy speaking, but 25 years ago, we made the choice, what is better for customers in public transport for ticketing? Is it QR code? It was yet QR code, or is it NFC? And definitively, the NFC solution was the only one answering to the needs of flow of passengers or speed of transaction. And we have to see what we see sometimes at the entrance of the railway platforms, when you have a QR code solution to access to these platforms. It's a nightmare, a real nightmare. So I think the decisive benefits for NFC is that it answers, and it only answers to the user experience, to the customer needs.
Yeah, and user experience is key. Luis, what's your view? What's the number one way? Go ahead.
Yeah, I really think that technology is not that important, in fact, in terms of MaaS. The customer doesn't really mind about technology. What he minds about is it going to be easy to use? So first of all, I think that in terms of technology, if we want to talk about this, NFC and contactless is far above all the other technologies. When we started explaining to journalists that you can even validate a smartphone using NFC, even if the smartphone is out of battery, they were really wordless. And that is really something that people would not expect. And we are also going to release a film in a few weeks about the comparative experience of customers between QR code and NFC. But when talking about MaaS, in fact, it's all a question of customer account. It's all a question of integration of different modes of transport for which there is no one size fits all. So NFC is pivotal because it is the technology of mass transit. But if you want to integrate scooters, if you want to integrate bikes, NFC is not necessarily the best technology. And in terms of MaaS, what is key is addressing as many customers and especially as many users of car as possible. There's an interesting move that has been made by RATP recently. They have purchased Mappy, which is sort of French equivalent of Waze, which is getting access to the users of cars using the apps and the media they already use when driving from point A to point B, and making them use more public and collective transit in general. So I think, in fact, technology is not at the center of this. We have seen through the presentations that the technology do exist. There are APIs, there are platforms. It all runs very well, and the technology is there. What is not there yet is gaining access to the customers and making them seeing how easy it is to use public transit and collective transit in general.
Thanks, Luis. Steve, what's your view? What's the number one way NFC can make a substantial difference in MaaS?
I think it's that ease of use and that adoption. As we all know, not all these solutions are created equal, and it's getting that understanding out into those transit authorities to understand how these systems differ. But I think if we're talking specifically around NFC, it's that capability of using the device in that environment, and it's the simplicity of it. It's that sort of approachability to it. And again, you look at come back to the path. Is it easy to understand? Because if you were to explain to a passenger, right, this is MaaS, this is what you need to understand, they will probably glaze over and just say, I just want to use my phone to place on a gate, beep, and go through. That's what they're after. That's the next of what they're looking for. So it's that NFC gives and enables that, and is simple to understand, is simple to use and consume. If you have to explain the technology to the passenger, then I think there's something missing, and you really need to sort of go back to what's the proposition for the passenger. And I think that's the one thing that NFC absolutely gives, is that ability to take your phone, place it, it goes beep, and you walk through a gate line. I mean, probably shouldn't work in marketing, but that's effectively what customers are after.
Yeah, the intuitive nature of NFC and the seamless contactless experience that it provides, surely. So we have a question for all panelists from audience. What is the most interesting statistics you have seen lately related to the future success of MaaS? So any of you who want to attempt this?
Well, I think at the moment, I think with everything that's going on at the moment with restrictions, it's a little early to sort of look and decide what the environment will look like. So how will those journeys be consumed? It's clear there is going to be a mix and a redressing of some of the balances in terms of how cities are laid out, how they are distributed. And clearly there will need to be a more distributed mix of those services. So rather than being reliant on a rail service going up and down, it will be end of services, and that mix and that how that plays out is still to be determined, but the future will be different, and it will be a blend and a mix of micro, car, rental, bike, ferry, you name it, and throw that into the mix. It will all form part of that approach to the future, because I think whatever we get back to, I think there are some fundamental changes to society that we will see and reflect in terms of our working lives, in terms of our leisure time, and how we can then deliver those services for the future. So I think there's a massive opportunity there, but I think the exact numbers, I think if anybody was to try and guess, I think it would be a good go, but I think we just don't know at the moment how that will look. But I believe that it will be a mix, and I think it will support MaaS for future consumption.
Too early to give numbers at this point, and be careful to give numbers at this point. Got it. And I see that our time is up, and how fast the time flies when we are having a good time, right? So I would like to thank everyone for this insightful discussion. You are an excellent panel, and we hope to hear from all of you. For sure, I'll reach out to you guys. Mike, I can hand it back to you.